While the whole town frantically shoveled snow away from their cabins, one man did the opposite. David Reeves packed it firmly against his walls, building a thick white shell around his home.
Reeves, you are burying yourself alive. That snow's gonna crush you come morning.
He didn't answer. He just kept shoveling, packing the snow tighter against the log walls.
He's been at it for days, says the snow will keep his cabin warmer. Man's lost his mind.
The town gathered at the general store, shaking heads. They called it exhaustion, delusion. But David had spent a winter with trappers far north, and they'd taught him a secret about the cold. The red arrow on his wall wasn't a warning. It was the path for breathable air. The first real blizzard was gathering beyond the ridge, and only one man in the valley welcomed it. He looked at the darkening sky and didn't flinch, because he knew something the others didn't. Snow wasn't the enemy. The blizzard struck just before dusk, a white wall barreling through the valley that swallowed roofs and roads whole. The town vanished into their cabins, praying that their cleared roofs would hold against the crushing weight.
Reeves, you stubborn fool. That snow blanket is going to become your grave, not any kind of shelter.
He's still out there. No one should be alone in weather like this. Not even a madman.
David packed the final layer of snow around the vent, the red flag fluttering in the growing darkness.
Rook, this vent is our breath. Without it, we're buried alive. You hear me. Nothing must block it.
By nightfall, the cabin was a smooth white mound, only the chimney and vent breaking the surface. Inside, David sealed the door and lit a candle. The air was still, and the cold was kept at bay. The town lay buried in snow and silence. Only one cabin glowed with a single amber eye, defying the blizzard. And as the storm howled across the valley, the real test of David's counterintuitive gamble had only just begun. The storm clawed at the valley all night, and by first light, the world beyond the cabin walls had vanished.
Rook, feel that. The air is still warm, no draft. That old trapper knew what he was talking about.
The cabin was dead still. Not a shiver of cold leaked through the packed snow walls.
What is this? The fire's burning hot, but it might as well be outside. Ice on the inside of the windows.
His door had frozen solid overnight, sealing him inside like a tomb.
If I can't clear the roof drift soon, the beams won't hold, but I can barely feel my hands. That fool Reeves. Maybe he wasn't so crazy after all. This cold is eating through the bare wood.
David checked the vent shaft. The red flag was barely visible above the fresh snowpack.
A few more feet of snow and even the vent could seal over. Got to keep it clear. That's our lifeline.
The blizzard was far from over. And as the second day of the storm began, the valley's real nightmare was just taking shape. The storm ground on without mercy, and every cleared cabin in the valley became a frozen box, sucking warmth straight into the wind.
My cleared walls are just bleeding heat into the wind. I'd trade anything for a foot of snow against this logging now.
That groaning overhead ain't the wind. It's the beams. If this roof gives way, there's nothing between me and the sky.
Inside the snow-buried cabin, David noticed the candle flame stretching thin, a sign the vent was sealing over.
Air's getting thin. Rook, the red flag must have disappeared under a fresh drift. We're losing our lifeline.
He pulled on his heavy coat and forced the door against a wall of packed snow, climbing the buried cabin like a mountain.
Not today. This vent stays open, no matter how much snow the sky throws down.
His bare hands clawed through ice crust, packing snow away from the shaft until a thin ribbon of gray daylight reappeared. Back inside, ice caked his beard and his hands shook, but the candle burned strong and steady again. The blizzard showed no sign of breaking, and David knew his battle to breathe was only the first of many. The storm's howl had dropped, but now a new sound cut through the snow-muffled world. A desperate, rhythmic banging.
Rook, listen. That's not the storm. Someone's hammering against wood. They're trying to break out.
David climbed up to peer through the thin slot of the vent. In the swirling white, he saw nothing. But the banging came again, frantic and close. Across the valley, Sam Heller had taken an axe to his frozen door. His hands were bloodless purple.
Open up, you frozen piece of... I can't breathe. The smoke's backing up. I got to get out.
But the axe slipped from his numb grip. The door didn't budge, and the cold pushed deeper into his bones. Inside her cabin, Martha heard the desperate pounding and felt her own beams groan. She knew if Sam died, she might be next.
That idiot Reeves? Maybe he had it right all along. Snow keeps the cold out, not just buries you. If only he were still alive.
David pulled back from the vent. He could guess the truth. The town was dying, and his snow cave was the only real shelter left.
I can't go out in this. But if the storm doesn't break soon, there won't be anyone left to save. We wait. We breathe.
The blizzard thickened, and the frantic banging from the valley faded into a deadly silence.
They've stopped. Either they broke through, or... He didn't let the thought finish.
He pressed his ear to the snow wall. Nothing but the roar of wind. The silence was worse. Across the valley, Sam Heller lay slumped against his frozen door, shallow breaths misting weakly. Martha's cabin roof groaned under a weight it was never designed to bear. A sharp crack split the air.
No, not yet. She shoved a table under the sagging beam, hands too numb to feel the wood.
David checked his dwindling supplies. The candle was half its original length. Time burned down.
Rook, if we don't hear anything soon, we're going to have to risk it. I won't let them die out there.
He stared at his shovel leaning against the wall, the same one they'd mocked. Now it was the only key to reach anyone. The storm outside showed no pity. Inside the warm cocoon, David faced a colder burden, choosing when to leave. A sudden stillness fell over the valley. The howling wind dropped to a whisper, and for a breath, the snow stopped.
Rook, that's our window. If I don't move now, we'll lose them both. Stay here and guard the vent.
He strapped on his homemade snowshoes, tied a lifeline rope around his waist, and grabbed the long wooden probe from beside the door. Pushing through the snow-packed door, he plunged into a world erased white, the wind's silence heavier than its roar.
The red arrow on the wall is my only way back. If I can't find it in this whiteout, this cabin becomes my grave too.
He moved by dead reckoning, tapping the probe into the drifts, straining to hear the answering thud of a buried roof. A muffled cry rose from beneath the drift. A single word his frozen ears almost missed. He dropped to his knees, digging with bare hands.
Martha, hold on. I am coming through.
His shovel bit into wood, the roof slats. He tore them apart, and Martha's pale face stared up from the darkness.
Reeves, you are alive? They said you'd be dead by now.
David hauled Martha up through the broken roof slats into the snow trench, her body trembling like a dying leaf.
Sam, he's still trapped. The smoke was choking him when I last heard.
David tied the rope around her waist and pointed toward the faint red smudge of his cabin's arrow in the distance.
Follow the line back. Rook is guarding the door. Don't stop for anything.
She obeyed, crawling away into the white, while he turned toward Sam Heller's buried home with no guide but memory. The wind rose again, a low moan, and fresh snow began to fill the tracks he'd just made. The window was closing.
If the arrow disappears under this blow, I won't find my own front door.
He trudged through chest-deep powder, probing for Sam's roof, but the drifts had shifted, wiping every landmark.
Sam, can you hear me? Give me a sound.
A faint, desperate cough answered from beneath the white. David dropped to his knees and began to dig. Time was nearly gone. His bare hands tore at the packed snow, bleeding warm tracks. Beneath, he felt Sam's faint breath.
Keep breathing. Sam, I am almost through the roof. Don't you give up on me now.
The timbers groaned as he widened the hole. A puff of smoke escaped. Sam's stove still smoldered.
Thought I was dead. Couldn't get the door.
David hauled Sam up by his arm, but the snow wall shuddered and threatened to collapse.
If this drift caves in, we're both buried. No one will ever find us.
When he turned to find the lifeline, the rope had vanished under a fresh drift. Their path was gone.
No rope, no time. We move now or freeze. Follow my tracks before they disappear.
He squinted toward his cabin, but the red arrow had dissolved into a white wall. The way home was blind. The blizzard shrieked, swallowing them both. David knew they had only minutes before the cold finished its work. Sam's weight pulled them deeper into the drift, his legs giving out. David dragged him by the collar, lungs burning.
Sam, stay with me. I see something. A faint red mark on the snow ahead. It's the arrow.
But the mark vanished in a swirl of white. David clawed forward, not sure if his mind was inventing the sign.
Leave me, Reeves. Save yourself. I can't. My legs are stone.
Number, you mocked me for this snow. Now it's saving your life. Shut up and move.
Then, through the howl, a sound cut the wind. A dog's bark, sharp and close. Rook had followed the vent's edge. The dog plunged through the powder toward them, guiding David's frozen hand onto the wooden wall of his own cabin.
Good boy, Rook, show me the door.
David found the buried door by feel, tore it open, and shoved Sam into the amber warmth just as the storm roared behind them. The door slammed shut. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, 3 bodies gasped in the quiet glow, and the laugh of the town had died with the cold. The warmth of the stove wrapped around them like a blanket. Sam's purple lips were slowly pinking, Martha's shakes easing.
Reeves, I called you a fool, but you weren't burying yourself. You were building a shield.
I am not a shield, Sam. I just listened. Snow traps the air. Still air keeps the cold out. The trappers taught me that.
He pointed up the ventilation shaft. A sliver of pale daylight still glowed at the top.
But what about the others? The storm's still building. Those cleared cabins are coffins now.
Outside, the wind didn't just howl, it screamed with a new, deeper fury. The second storm the trappers had warned about was arriving.
This one will be worse. The first blast clears the sky, the second buries everything. We're not done yet.
He checked his supplies. Enough food for days, but the real danger was above them, the life breath of the vent.
If this second storm seals the vent completely, we'll have maybe an hour of air. No one's digging us out.
The trap was set, not by snow, but by the very insulation that saved them. And the clock was ticking. The second storm didn't just howl, it attacked. The vent's red flag disappeared under fresh drifts, packing snow tight as concrete over the opening.
It's sealed. No light. The snow turned against us.
The candle flame stretched thin as the oxygen level dropped. Sam's breaths grew shallow, Martha's eyes heavy.
We'll dig out. I'd rather freeze trying than choke in here.
Outside is death in minutes. The vent is our only hope. I have to clear it from the roof.
He pulled on his frozen coat and seized his wooden shovel, the same one they'd mocked. Now it was the only tool that could save them all.
You can't. The storm's twice as bad. You won't find the arrow in that whiteness.
I painted that arrow into the snow for a reason. If I don't go, every breath we take is stolen.
He tied the rope tightly around his waist, handed the end to Sam, and spoke through numb lips. If it goes slack, pull. Don't wait. The door wrenched open. Wind and snow swallowed him instantly. Martha and Sam watched the rope unwind into chaos. David clawed up the snow-packed slope, following the memory of the red arrow. The storm's claws slashed through his coat.
Old trapper said, "The snow that keeps you warm. is the same snow that can bury you for the spring.
His frozen fingers brushed the faint red paint on the snow wall, his lifeline back to the vent. He dug with bare hands, chipping away at the ice plug. The rope around his waist grew taut from inside. With a sharp crack, the ice gave way. A shaft of pale light shot down, and a gasp of fresh air rushed past his face.
He did it. I see light. Pull him back.
But as the rope pulled, the snow crust beneath David collapsed. He plunged through the drift, rope burning in his grip.
The rope went slack. Sam, he's not moving.
They think I'm dead, but I'm still breathing. Just buried.
The storm swallowed his shout. Above, the vent was open. Below, the cabin had air. But David was sealed into a frozen tomb of his own making. Inside the suffocating darkness, David felt the rope twitch against his ribs. They were pulling.
If I fight it, I'll tear this air pocket open. If I go limp, maybe they can drag me through.
His frozen fingers found the knot and gripped it, not to pull, but to hold on.
He's not dead. I felt something move. Pull harder, Martha.
David closed his eyes and forced his body slack. The snow groaned around him as the rope bit deep.
This snow that saved me might crush me now, but if I don't trust them, I die alone.
The rope jerked with brutal force. His body lurched through the drift like a broken doll.
He's coming. Keep pulling, Sam. Don't you let go.
David felt rough wood scrape his back. The rope dragged him through the packed snow toward the buried door. And in that frozen slide, one truth pierced colder than the storm. The loner who built his shield alone now had no choice but to be saved by the hands he once ignored. As the rope hauled him toward the buried door, David's eyes fixed on the wooden frame. It was splintering under the snow's weight.
Stop pulling. The frame's giving way. Prop it with something.
He thrust his wooden shovel, the very one they'd mocked, into the gap between door and drift, wedging it tight as a brace.
We are not leaving you out there. Pull together, Martha.
They yanked him through into the amber glow, but the doorframe groaned and buckled, avalanching a wall of snow through the opening.
The door won't hold now. Cold air is flooding in. We'll freeze anyway.
I gave up my shovel. Now I have to give up my coat. Everything they laughed at is what keeps us alive.
He tore off his heavy gray coat and stuffed it into the gap, packing fistfuls of snow over it until the draft died. The hiss of wind faded to a whisper. The stove's heat crept back, and four bodies, shivering, stripped, alive, drew into the same tight circle. The shield he built had demanded more than snow. It had demanded the one thing he'd never given before: trust and the coat off his own back. The storm battered the cabin for hours. David fed the stove with dusty split logs until only a few sticks remained.
That's the last of it. After this, the only heat is our bodies.
Then I'll go out. I owe you that. I know where to dig for the woodpile.
No one goes out. The wind will take you in minutes. That woodpile is buried under 8 feet of drift.
A deep cracking sound split the air. The doorframe caved another inch, snow hissing through the coat.
That door won't last another hour. We'll freeze, fire or not.
Rook whined, pressing against his leg. David looked at his bed, then to the door.
We break up the bed, burn the frame, brace the door with the long plank.
They tore apart his only bed, feeding the pine to the flames. The longest slat he wedged against the door. Outside, the blizzard shrieked like a living thing. Inside, 4 shadows leaned toward the glow, their breath slow, their hope brittle as the cracking door. The fire was down to embers now, barely aglow. The cold crept in from every seam, sharp teeth nipping at their ears. Sam stared at the door brace, then at David. The offer hung unspoken between them.
I'll go. I am more used to cold. You stay and keep them alive.
Number, you'll die in the drifts. I packed every inch of this snow myself. It's my mountain, not yours.
You can't go. You are our only chance. If you don't come back,
Then I won't come back alone. Trust me one more time.
He handed Sam one end of the rope. The candle stub he wedged into a tin cup. If I don't pull twice in 30 seconds, pull me back. The door groaned open. Snow flooded in. David pushed through and was swallowed by the white. Sam fed the rope, counting under his breath. Inside, Martha clutched Rook. Her eyes wide on the flame David left behind. The rope went taut, then slack, then taut again, but no double pull. The storm raged. The candle flickered. And somewhere in the blind white world, David fought his last battle alone. David crawled blind, hands tracing the drift he'd packed himself. Every footstep of snow he'd shoveled was now a map in his mind. His frozen palm struck wood, the buried woodpile. He ripped out splinters and logs, stuffing them into his coat. He yanked the rope twice, the signal. The line snapped taut. Sam and Martha dragged him and the fuel back through the frozen dark. Inside, he collapsed with an armful of frozen logs. Martha fed them to the embers, and a bright flame roared up.
David, you bloody fool, you did it.
Told you to trust me.
The fire burned through the night, and as the wind died, a pale blue dawn broke over the valley. David pushed open the door. The valley was a sheet of white, but his cabin stood, warm and firm, while others were frozen shut. The town had laughed when he packed snow against his walls, but now, that snow was the only reason they lived. And somewhere, beyond the ridge, the old trapper who'd taught him the secret nodded quietly in the long memory of winter. Sam and Martha stepped out into the blinding white. For the first time, they saw the valley as David had planned it.
Our cabins, they're frozen shut. Yours is the only one still breathing. I called you a fool, and you saved my life.
My roof gave way. The back wall is solid ice. If you hadn't crawled through that drift, I'd be under it.
The red arrow, once a mockery, now stood like a brand of deliverance against the snow.
Snow isn't your enemy. Exposed walls are. I learned that from men who'd never seen a cleared roof in their lives.
They dug through the tunnels he'd carved, pulling families from iced-over cabins, their breath misting in disbelief. One by one, they huddled into his warm shell, the only refuge that had defied the blizzard's rage. Sam knelt beside the stove, tears freezing on his cheeks, and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The town that laughed at the fool burying himself alive now owed their lives to the very snow they had cleared. And as the sun set, the red arrow on David's wall pointed to the only truth left. The ones who mocked the snow had become its prisoners. In the days that followed, no one laughed when David walked through town. They only stood aside and nodded.
We're all building snow shells now, Reeves. Even I've got a vent with a red flag. You've changed this valley.
We cleared our roofs like fools. Now we're painting arrows on every wall. Your way is the only way.
It's not my way. It's just the way it's always been. Snow isn't the enemy. It's the shield.
The town voted that day to paint a red arrow on the general store door. Not a warning, but a lesson they'd never forget. David stood apart, Rook at his side, and didn't smile. He remembered the faces that had laughed.
Old Trapper always said, they'll call you mad until they need you. Maybe he was right.
That winter, the valley did not lose a single life, and every year since, when the first snow falls, they pack it against their walls. But only one cabin still carries the original red arrow that David Reeves painted into the snow with bleeding hands. And if you walk to that ridge on a still winter night, you'll see his window glowing like a red heartbeat in the snow. David rarely went to the store where the new red arrow hung. He preferred his own wall, the original paint flaking but true. He'd rebuilt his bed with salvaged pine, but the coat he'd stuffed into the doorframe he never replaced.
The old Trapper always said, What you give to winter, winter gives back tenfold. I gave my coat. It gave me a town.
On still afternoons, he'd walk the ridge, Rook beside him, and watch the valley below, each cabin now a white mound with a tiny red flag. Sam Heller's vent caught the sun, winking like a second fire. Martha's arrow was the brightest, painted fresh every autumn.
They called me a fool. Now they're all fools with me. Snow doesn't kill. Ignorance does.
Behind him, the original arrow held its ground under a new layer of pack, the red bleeding into the white like a promise. The wooden shovel that had saved them stood upright in the snow beside the door, a silent sentinel. No one dared move. On the ridge, the wind never laughed. It only passed over the mound that wasn't a grave, but a home. And the red arrow, still pointing upward, taught the valley that sometimes the deepest wisdom is buried in plain sight. Time passed, and the ridge wore his footprints like a familiar path, Rook always a half step ahead. The valley below had become a patchwork of white mounds and red flags, every chimney breathing.
They call it the Reeves method. Now, I just call it listening.
The original arrow on his cabin never needed a fresh coat. It had bled into the wood like a scar. Spring came, and the snow melted, but his cabin stood solid. The arrow now part of the log. From the ridge, you could still see it, a sliver of red pointing to the sky, reminding everyone. And on the coldest nights, when the wind howled, the window glowed amber, and the red arrow was a heartbeat.
Snow taught me everything. It buried my pride and gave me back a town.
The arrow pointed upward, beyond the storm, beyond the valley, to a silent truth that outlasted the laughter. And in the end, the fool was the only one who saw the snow for what it was, a blanket, not a shroud.